Brace yourselves. Pastors writing theological reflections about Star Wars are coming. Most pastors I know are geeks, so it's no surprise that many of them seem more excited about the arrival of a new Star Wars movie this year than the arrival of a baby in Bethlehem. After all, we seem to have this baby in Bethlehem arrive every year, and it's not every year that you get a new Star Wars movie, so woohoo, Star Wars! Over the decades, I've seen a lot of pastors grab themes from the Star Wars movies to use as a basis of reflection for theological ideas that they find in the gospel. And since that's basically what I do all the time, taking themes from pop culture, especially science fiction and fantasy, to use as fodder for theological reflection, I'm certainly in no place to be throwing stones. Mr. Glass House right here on this subject. And I love Star Wars, and I have been excited for this movie too. Heck, I even wrote a paper in seminary that compared the overall narrative structure of the Deuteronomistic history in the Old Testament to the original Star Wars trilogy. It begins with plucky underdogs defeating more powerful people. We learn to root for the House of David against the mighty forces of Empire which surround them. But then in the middle, those forces of Empire strike back as Babylon sacks the city of Jerusalem, destroys the temple, and sends the House of David into exile. Yet ultimately, that empire is defeated, and the exilees are allowed to return, and the Deuteronomists and the prophets leave us with the sense that the House of David is just on the verge of bursting back into full bloom. So I guess what I'm saying is I know that theological reflection can be done on the Star Wars movies. I've done it myself, and I'm not even promising I won't do it again. Heck, I might make a movie about The Force Awakens once I won't lose all my friends for spoiling everyone about it. But what I'm wanting to say is, and I know you could feel that there was a but coming, there's some problems with the Star Wars movies that don't make it a very good analog for Christianity or really any coherent philosophy. The absolute dichotomy between light and dark sides of the Force is a better match for, I don't know, Manichaeanism or Zoroastrianism. It certainly isn't a good match for Taoism, despite the fact that the films borrow from a kind of pop Eastern philosophy. The two opposing forces, the yin and yang in Taoism, are both necessary, and neither one is strictly good nor evil. There are glimmers of the Buddhist idea of non-attachment in the Jedi philosophy, but the key virtue that non-attachment is supposed to produce is compassion. And not only does the Jedi Order prohibit any romantic or loving relationship for developing, but they also seem to have no problem with the taking of life. It's more of a martial philosophy in that way, akin to Bushido. I guess what I'm saying is that it's a hodgepodge of random things that don't really fit well together and ultimately don't make much sense. But it doesn't have to make sense because it's not a philosophical work. It's an action blockbuster. It's for fun. Now, the Star Wars movies don't have to make sense philosophically or theologically because they're action blockbusters. Their purpose is to entertain, and they're doing that pretty well. This isn't a complaint about the Star Wars movie and whether or not the writers of the Star Wars movie are doing a good enough job using the philosophy that they choose to borrow for narrative purposes. This is more a reminder to people like me who like to read philosophical ideas out of cultural products that we consume, of movies and books and games and stories that we enjoy, and attempt to compare them philosophically and theologically to our own faith. There's a tendency when we do that to read them eisegetically, which is to attempt to read into them things that aren't really there. The Star Wars movies aren't works of Christian theology, and we don't have to try to make them be in order for us to be able to enjoy them. Sometimes looking for the deeper meaning of a thing is actually a way of being unfaithful to the thing itself. Some things should be enjoyed for just what they are, rather than trying to fit them into some predetermined system of meaning or philosophy, which doesn't really fit the thing itself that well. Someone once said sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, sometimes a burrito is just a burrito, and sometimes a lightsaber is just a kick-ass laser sword you use to cut someone's arm off.